Hey, this is Warren Redlick. Two topics for today's video. First, I'm going to talk about Lucid Motors. We got some news from Lucid Motors I just want to cover briefly. Won't take that long with it. Second, I want to talk about Aptera. Aptera is a company that is proposing to make a two-passenger hyper-efficient electric vehicle with solar panels built into the body. I've been critical of both companies in the past. I want to go through the latest news and latest analysis on both of those. We're going to start with Lucid Motors. Lucid Motors just announced their Q4 production and deliveries. Last month, the CFO left. A few days before that, Lucid Aptera was named to Car and Driver's 10 Best list in its first year of eligibility. Interesting that Car and Driver, or is apparently for rent, change in variation of a car that isn't selling, that you already named a 10 best car that no one buys, all of a sudden becomes a 10 best car. We don't know how much Lucid paid Car and Driver to put them on the 10 best list for a relatively unimpressive car compared to the first one they made. Sherry House departed. We don't make a big deal out of it, or I don't make a big deal out of it when Tesla executives leave, so I won't make a big deal out of Sherry House leaving. I do think it's a sinking ship. I think it's been obviously a sinking ship for a while. I don't think I need to see the CFO leave to tell me it's a sinking ship. I'm going to go through some more numbers here to show that. Let's start with these numbers. So Lucid announced that they produced 2,391 vehicles during Q4 and delivered 1,734 vehicles during the same period. And for the year, they produced 8,428 vehicles and delivered 6,001 vehicles. There's a little trickery here. They actually sort of produced over 9,000 vehicles, and I'll show you that in a second. Another key news detail, Lucid announced a recall of over 2,000 luxury sedans. Now, this one it's a faulty component, so this is a physical thing that may need to be fixed. But rather than bringing them all in, they may have faulty high voltage coolant heaters, so they're going to do an over-the-air update to see if they can identify which ones need to be replaced. That's not the same thing as Tesla doing an over-the-air update to update how FSD runs. There's a physical component that's a problem in the car. How many of them, we don't know. Normally, you would think they would bring them all in. They may have to bring them all in, but they're playing a game with over-the-air updates. Maybe worthwhile, maybe not. So let's go into my spreadsheet. I had this spreadsheet in the past. I've updated the spreadsheet. I don't remember doing this for Q3, so I added Q3 numbers in here. And notice this 700 to Saudi. Let me just show you that. When they announced their Q3 production and delivery numbers, they said they produced 1,550 vehicles, plus over 700 additional vehicles in transit to Saudi Arabia for final assembly. So their numbers for the year, I put 1,550 in the Q3 line and the production line, 1,550. But there's another 700 for the Saudis. Now, when they did their total production for the year, they left out these 700, so they still haven't been assembled in Saudi Arabia, apparently. But that's a cost on their cash flow that they're not necessarily accounting for. So what you see is Q4, they delivered 1,734 vehicles, which is an improvement over the previous 3 quarters. It gets them just over 6,000 vehicles for the year. It's not as high as Q4 of 2022, when they delivered 1,900 vehicles. An important thing to notice is revenue per delivery. And I just added this column today. So you can see in Q4 of 2021, in their early deliveries, they were generating over $200,000 in revenue per delivery. That number has been falling, and in Q3, the revenue per delivery number actually fell to under $100,000, under $95,000. With the addition of the Air Pure probably being the highest volume vehicle they're selling, I'm projecting that they're doing $90,000 a vehicle. It may very well be less. So at $90,000 a vehicle, you're going to see revenue in Q4 of around $150 million. And we don't know what's going to happen with operating loss and free cash flow yet. But you'll notice in Q3, their free cash flow was negative $700 million. Well, how much cash did they have left? They only had $1.16 billion in cash left on hand. So they burned through. If they have the same burn that they had last quarter, they're going to burn through nearly all of the cash on hand. They're going to have to take some of the short-term investments and turn them into cash. And you can just see the path. If they're burning $700 million a quarter, it's only a few quarters away from the end. And, they're struggling to sell cars. And then you have this question, okay, well, you made 2,428 cars more than you sold, really 3,000 cars more than you sold. Right? This 8428 produced 6,000 delivered, but really you produced 9,000. So you have half as many cars that you couldn't sell as the ones you could sell. That's not a good sign. Like, what are they doing with these cars? And it's persistent. Every quarter they produce more than they sell, and there's never, Q3 they sort of made it look like they caught up, but that's because they shipped 700 cars to Saudi Arabia. They didn't finish assembly. They didn't sell them. Why did you ship the cars in Q3 if you weren't going to assemble them in Q4? How long does it take to assemble a car? They didn't assemble one. That's freaky. It's just freaky. So that's Lucid Motors. I really mostly stopped covering Lucid Motors because from what I can tell, the audience has lost interest. This company is clearly on its way to failure. We don't know what form the failure is going to take, but the company's done. Maybe they'll raise more money from the Saudis. Maybe the Saudis will hand them more cash. I don't know. I don't see how this company continues. When will Project Gravity actually have a delivery? We're probably looking at 2026. Maybe the end of 2025, you run out of cash before you get to delivering Project Gravity, and you're going to lose even more money on Project Gravity until you ramp that. And you're not really going to make money on Project Gravity either. So you're really looking at some future vehicle you're going to sell in 2028. I don't see how the company survives that long. Turning to Aptera, I've been picking on Aptera for a while. I made a video a while ago, and people continue to comment on my old YouTube video where I was critical of Aptera however long ago that was. So if you go back to their presentation in July of 2020, Aptera told investors they were close to production. July of 2020, they told investors they were close to production. And they projected that in 2023, they would be delivering the Aptera Semi. Right, the Aptera Semi. Okay, so this is a company that people place credibility in. I don't know. So Tailosive, a guy I like, he has a YouTube channel, but for some reason he keeps pumping Aptera. He believes in Aptera. There's sort of like Lucid Motors in the early days, there was this core cadre of believers. Probably Nikola had these cadre of believers. People want to believe the story. If you tell a great story, Boxable tells a great story, Aptera tells a great story, Lucid told a great story. People want the story. If they buy the story, that's it. So Tailosive said that Marcus Brownlee, the background is MKBHD. Marcus Brownlee was doing a video with a couple other guys, and they were pretty dismissive of Aptera, saying, "Oh, it's never going to reach the market." And in the video, Tailosive said, "Oh, MKBHD doesn't really understand Aptera. He's just a electronics guy. He doesn't really understand cars." Yeah, you understand cars, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of MKBHD, but I don't know that you understand cars better than MKBHD does. And claimed that MKBHD didn't really research it. It is a fair point that when you watch the video, they just sort of casually dismissed it. They didn't demonstrate that they'd really studied the company. But one of the points he made was that he didn't know that Sandy Munro was involved. But Sandy Munro was involved with Arcimoto, and people told us, "Oh, Sandy's involved with Arcimoto. That's a really good sign." Well, I would say, based on what happened to Arcimoto, Sandy being involved might not be a good sign. It might be a negative. I love Sandy. I think Sandy's a great guy. I love him in person. I love his teardowns. But having him as a consultant on your startup EV company so far hasn't manifested itself well. So I did this thread recently, the other day. I wanted to break down the fundamental problem with Aptera. One of the fundamental problems with Aptera. And there's a claim that they're making that they're going to get 400 miles of range on a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, which would be 10 miles a kilowatt hour. Now, the reason I'm more familiar with this is because I've been working on my pod car startup idea. It's only an idea. I did get approval for a visa in Japan that I'm not following through on. I'm looking into getting approval for a visa here in Thailand. I'm in Bangkok. I'm looking into that as a possibility. But look, I haven't done anything yet, right? But I've done analysis. I've had engineering. I've paid for engineering designs. I've spent in the ballpark of $10,000, $20,000 on this dumb idea that I may ever go through with. But one of the things I did was I looked into what am I trying to achieve? And they're claiming 10 miles a kilowatt hour. I want to try to achieve 20 miles a kilowatt hour. Well, how do I see myself getting to 20 miles a kilowatt hour? I'm cutting the weight not by half, but 1/7, from 1,400 kilograms to 200 kilograms. I'm cutting the frontal surface area of the car by so much. It's basically 1/3 of the frontal surface area of a Model 3, and then a lower coefficient of drag based on aerodynamic design that's going to be much more aerodynamic than this Aptera thing. And the Aptera is very aerodynamic. I'm not trying to cut away from. They have a great coefficient of drag, but they have a lot of frontal surface area. And I'm struggling to justify my own goal of getting to 20 miles a kilowatt hour. I'm not sure I'm going to get there. With like everything going right, I'm not sure I can get to 20 miles a kilowatt hour because it's really hard to improve your efficiency that much. And these guys are claiming 10 miles a kilowatt hour. So let's do some napkin math. Tesla Model 3 gets about 4.6 miles per kilowatt hour is EPA rated range. Let's assume equal motor efficiency and battery management with Tesla. Now, that's a pretty big assumption because I don't think Aptera has the same level of engineering, battery management engineering, Drivetrain engineering is Tesla. Tesla's been working on battery management, and motor efficiency for, I don't know, 16 years or something like that. They've got a little bit of a lead. They've got a little bit more engineering talent. They've got a little bit more money invested. Even Lucid, did better than I expected, but Lucid spent billions of dollars, right? Well, what is Aptera spending? Tens of millions of dollars on engineering at most? So half of the curb weight increases efficiency by roughly 10%. Maybe you can go a little more than that, but call that 5.1 miles per kilowatt hour. And then Aptera is much wider than Model 3 and Model X. It's almost as wide as Cybertruck. So I estimate Aptera's frontal surface area is actually larger than Model 3. I get 3.11 square meters of frontal surface area versus 2.66 for Model 3. Now you multiply by the coefficient of drag of 0.23 for the pre-refresh Model 3, it's now 3.22, but for the new Model 3 versus the claimed 1.13 for Aptera, and you end up with the drag is about 2/3 of a Model 3. Let's say that improves overall efficiency by 10%. You're still worse than 7. You're still not even getting to 6 miles per kilowatt hour. Maybe your three-wheel design improves efficiency a little bit. I'm not so sure it does. I think actually having the third wheel positioned in the center increases your frontal surface area effectively. Tesla's had the best EV engineers in the world, iterating for 16 plus years now. They almost certainly have better motor efficiency and battery management than Aptera. Aptera is claiming our hub motors are more efficient. Well, why are you the only ones using them? Why aren't we seeing hub motors more widely deployed? Aptera is likely to underperform on its claimed curb weight, its frontal surface area, and its drag coefficient in any vehicle it actually delivers. That's pretty typical for a lot of companies, if it actually delivers a vehicle at all. The launch edition price of the Aptera that they've said so far will be slightly lower than a Model 3. If they get 6 miles a kilowatt hour, which I'm still saying I'm not sure they're going to pull off, they would get 240 miles of range. If they got 7 miles a kilowatt hour, they would basically get the same range as a Model 3 standard range at 272 miles of EPA rated range. They got 3 fewer seats, 2 seats instead of 5. It's awkward to drive and park with due to the width. The front end of the vehicle is really, really wide. It's basically you're driving a pickup truck on the front end. The software is going to be nowhere near Tesla's quality. The safety is going to be nowhere near Tesla's quality. The service is going to be nowhere close to Tesla's available service. It's also going to charge slower than Tesla's, even at Tesla superchargers. When you look at their numbers, and I could pull this up, but when you look at their numbers, my ballpark is they're looking at a max charge rate of about 1.5 C. If you have a battery pack that's got 10 kilowatt hours and you charge at 1 C, you're charging at 10 kilowatts. And it takes you an hour to charge the battery at 1 C, assuming you have a constant rate. And what you have with Teslas and what you have with most EVs is they get a higher charge rate at the early time. And then as the battery fills up or gets more charge, the charge rate declines. So a Tesla will be charging at 250 kilowatts at its peak, and it will decline to 70 kilowatts or even slower as it gets close to full, because the electrons are having trouble finding their position in the battery. So my guess is that they have a lower charge rate at 1.5 C instead of 3 C because they don't have the same battery management as Tesla, and they may not have the cooling on the battery pack that you need, or the temperature control on the battery pack that you need. There's a lot of things going on here. So it's actually going to charge, despite having a smaller battery pack, it's going to charge slower than a Tesla. They're talking about, it's going to charge so many miles. Yeah, it's going to charge, if you have a 1,000-mile range and you charge 10%, you've added 100 miles, but you're not really going to have a 1,000-mile range. And nobody cares about that. Are you charging the vehicle to full or not? Are you charging to 80% or not? Are you really just charging for 100 miles? No. So then you have the issue of how much money are they going to lose? They're going to lose at least $100,000 a car on the first 10,000 vehicles that while they're ramping. If they ever ramp to 10,000 deliveries, right? So, if they're going to lose $100,000 a car, they're going to lose $100,000 a car times 10,000 cars. They have to lose $1 billion, but they don't have $1 billion to lose. I think they have less than $100 million cash on hand. How the heck are they supposed to ramp production? It costs a lot of money to build cars in volume. So how are you going to do that? You think they're going to manufacture these cars for $30,000 a piece and sell them for $35,000? No way. In the early days, it costs more to build the vehicles. So they're going to be making the cars for $200,000 and selling them for $35,000, or $150,000 and selling them for $50,000, whatever it is. They're going to lose $100,000 a car for the first 10,000 cars. That's $1 billion that they blow. Where are they getting the money? And who's buying this thing? Are there 10,000 buyers who will buy this when they can buy a Model 3 for maybe $5,000 more? When you look at Model Y and the tax credit, maybe you can buy a Model Y for close to the same price. Are you going to buy this thing when you can buy a Model Y for about the same price? New? Will banks agree to do financing for this? What will the insurance rates be? Have they done crash testing? I don't think they've done crash testing. How much is it going to cost them to crash test these vehicles? Do they have the money to be able to build the vehicles to crash test? You probably got to crash like 5, 10, 20 vehicles to pass crash testing. Maybe they don't have to qualify for crash testing because they're a three-wheel vehicle. Do you want to get in a car that hasn't been crash tested? Would you rather be in a Tesla Model 3 or Model Y that's one of the most crash-worthy vehicles in the world? Or would you rather get in a car that hasn't been crash tested because it's got three wheels and it gets by on an exemption? I, I don't see myself, this thing weighs 1,800 pounds versus 3,500 pounds for a Model 3, 4,000 pounds for a Model Y. What do you want to be in when you get hit by an SUV? I don't want to be in this. Look, the simple truth is that prototypes are easy, manufacturing is hard, and manufacturing and selling at a profit is much harder. I don't see how Aptera can succeed. And I just a really quick point. I did these numbers in the past. I did a different analysis back in November. I gave them a 50% reduction in mass could improve efficiency by at least by 35%. And a 40% reduction in drag could improve efficiency by 20%, leading to a 7.5 miles a kilowatt hour. You still don't get to 10 miles a kilowatt hour. And that's assuming everything's wrong and nobody corrected my math and came up with better numbers. I don't think you actually achieve this. I think this was over optimistic. I went through this, I did my own analysis, I used some tools, and I'm like, yeah, it's really, really hard to get your efficiency because the mass matters when you're barely moving. Like when you're accelerating, that's when mass matters. The drag matters when you're going fast. When you're going 20, 30 miles an hour, the drag doesn't matter that much. And your EPA rating is a combination of all these things. So you just don't gain that much from these. So you're really looking at 6, 7 miles a kilowatt hour. And if you get 6 miles a kilowatt hour and 40 kilowatt hour pack, you got 240 miles of range on a two-passenger vehicle that's awkward to drive and doesn't perform, has never been crash tested. I'm not getting in this thing. Would you buy this over a Model Y or a Model 3? No way. I don't see it. What's the vehicle you were thinking of buying that you say, you know what, instead of buying that, I'm going to buy an Aptera instead of buying that other vehicle I was thinking of, or 3 or Y? I don't get it. I don't see it. And the solar cells are a trivial, like, it's the story they told. We've got solar cells, we've got this hyper efficiency, look how cool this vehicle looks, and people bought the story. So what they're doing is they're selling people on getting people to invest in the company. So they continue to float the company based on investment rather than revenue. And they're probably, like I said this before with Lucid, and I was wrong. I said they were never going to sell a car, and they did sell a car. They've lost a ton of money selling cars. I didn't anticipate they would manufacture cars at $500,000 a piece and sell them for $100,000, right? I did not anticipate that they would be crazy enough to manufacture cars and lose over, hundreds of thousands of dollars a car. So I got that wrong. I guess I didn't see that coming. And I said, the problem is Lucid had the cash pile to be able to do it. Aptera doesn't have the cash pile. They don't have the cash pile to be able to pull this off. They don't have the Saudis ready to hand them checks. So unless you are willing to hand them money on this operation that has basically no prospect of ever being successful, they're going to fail. They can't really deliver vehicles in any volume at all. Maybe they'll deliver a few. Say, look, we delivered. Now give us money. We need more investment so we can, scale up manufacturing. Are you going to fall for it? I'm not going to fall for it. I cheat on my diet. I don't cheat on my women t-shirt at elonbits.com. Please check out the t-shirts. Please support me on the Locals platform as a YouTube channel member, as an ex-subscriber, or on Patreon. Check out my other videos, and thank you so much for watching.